PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 Jailbreak news update, starting with some big improvements that we have now for running our PS5 game backups over the past few days. Firstly, we have a new beta build of kstuff Lite and Shadow Mount to enable trophy support so that you can now unlock and view your trophies for your PlayStation 5 game backups. Now, the other big improvement is that we finally have a way to compress our game dumps. So PS5 game backups are typically just a folder with all of the raw game files stored inside, which can cause many games to balloon to well over 100 plus gigabytes in size. Even converting them to image files like exFAT, PFS, or UFS2 images would not actually make them any smaller. In fact, it would most of the time make them larger. But we now have a new project called Micromount and MKPFS from Renan Barreto that can create and mount compressed versions of your PS4 and PS5 game dumps, with support now being added to the latest version of Shadow Mount Plus. So I'm doing this test with Resident Evil Requiem, so 122 gigs. We'll see how much we can get this down with the compressed version. So first of all, if we open up a command prompt or PowerShell window as administrator, make sure we have Python installed with python ---- version. Then we can also install makepfs with the pip installer with pip space install space mkpfs, and that will install it for us. The recommended steps for this right now is to first of all turn your game dump into a regular uncompressed PFS image first by using this command that is shown here on the Shadow Mount Plus README. So we paste in the command here, and then we just enter in our game dump folder. In this case, it's ppsa 30803-app, and then the name of the PFS file that we're creating, which is going to be pfs_image.dat. So we just create that file and we press enter, and that will create our uncompressed version of our game dump first. So once we have our uncompressed file created, all we do is copy the next command to make the compressed version, and we paste that in. The source file, of course, is the pfs_image.dat file that we created, the uncompressed version. And then our output file is just going to be the title ID of the game with .ffpfsc as the file extension. And we can press enter, and that will create our compressed file. And you can see that the file size is showing 77.4 gigabytes in terms of the size on disk compared to 122 gigs. So a significant savings in size. And we can actually get that running on the console by plugging in that USB drive into the PS5 and then simply running kstuff Lite, the latest beta build, along with Shadow Mount Plus, the latest release of Shadow Mount Plus that now supports these compressed image files, which is v1.6 test 15 or higher. As you can see, it successfully detects our Resident Evil Requiem game backup, the compressed version, and it installs it just like any other game dump. And then once it's installed, we should be able to load it normally. We go ahead and launch the game, and it is running normally. I do lose signal for a few seconds, but that is normal. We can get all the way into the main menu. There are a few issues at the moment, and obviously it's not the most convenient thing to use right now to actually compress the image files, but obviously things will get improved over time, and we'll get some kind of, application that makes it easy to just convert your game dumps directly into a compressed file without having to install Python and install different modules. So it's generally going to get easier as time goes on. But this is a huge step, finally being able to compress our game dumps so that we can fit more games onto our drives, our external drives, our internal SSD, as well as being able to transfer them over to the internal storage faster if they're significantly smaller, which is great. So finally, we got a release for the PS4, which is GoldHEN version 2.4 B18.10 that was released by Sistro. So this is a new update that adds a very useful feature to GoldHEN, which is the payloader, which is now available. You can find it in the utilities section in GoldHEN. You will find the payloader, and you can load payloads directly from it by putting your payloads on the root of a USB drive inside a payloads folder in the root of the drive, or you can put the payloads folder in the data folder on the hard drive, which would be more preferable, because then you don't have to have the USB drive plugged in to load them. And then you can also have them on a disk as well. If you use a Blu-ray disc to jailbreak the console, you can have the payloads folder on the disk, and they will show up in the payloader within GoldHEN. And you can launch your payloads directly from within here by selecting X on them, and that will load them. You can also press the square button to add them to the Autoloader queue, so that whenever you load GoldHEN again, it will automatically run those payloads on GoldHEN startup, so you don't have to manually load them every single time. Definitely recommended for payloads like NanoDNS, so that you can auto-load it whenever you load GoldHEN, so you can have internet access while blocking game and system updates. Not only that, but you could also add things like the NP fake sign-in payload. So if you ever need to do the fake sign-in on an account, you can just have that payload in the payloader ready to load directly from there whenever you need it. So definitely a welcome feature added to GoldHEN here. It also has the ability to replace the icons. So it says here to add a custom icon, you can place a PNG file in the same directory as your payload using the exact same name followed by the .png extension. So if you have like a NanoDNS .bin file, which is your payload, you just put a image file, a PNG file, in the same location with the same name, nanodns.bin, with .png at the end, so .bin.png, and then it will replace the icon for that payload. As you can see in this image, the Hello World one has been changed to a different icon. So that's something you can do there as well. It's also fixed the SCE user service initialize failure on ELF payloads, so an issue from a previous version that has now been fixed. So that's what you've got there for the PS4, a new release of GoldHEN, bringing the version up to 2.4b18.10. And apparently NanoDNS was not working properly for some people who had it set to autoload inside GoldHEN. Hopefully this new version will fix it. There's a new version of NanoDNS for PS4 and PS5. This version here for PS4, it says the PS4 version has been fixed with GoldHEN compatibility now included. And also the PS5 version of it has been updated to support firmwares up to 13.20, whereas the previous version only worked up to firmware 12.0. So getting back to the PlayStation 5 news, we got the release of the Yarpe version of P2JB, which uses the yet another Ren'Py PlayStation exploit from Hello Yanho. So this userland exploit now works to load P2JB, as there's been a new implementation of P2JB for this exploit from Matem6. And this uses the game Arcade Spirits The New Challengers, and I've done a tutorial showing how to set this up already. I'll leave it linked below. And it works with the PS4 edition and PS5 edition of this specific game. So if you have a copy of this game, you can now use it to jailbreak up to 12.70 and unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak. So that is fantastic. So now we can jailbreak up to 12.70 using Star Wars Racer Revenge with the Lua Core exploit. We can use the Japanese Artemis engine games with the Autoloader exploit, and also now using the Yarpe exploit with Arcade Spirits The New Challengers as well. So quite a few different options for loading this jailbreak, as well as the YouTube application to jailbreak up to 12.40. So speaking of the Lua Core exploit, that has also been updated. So this was the original exploit that added support for P2JB first with Star Wars Racer Revenge. It's gone from version 2.2D to version 2.3, where the kernel exploits, the Poops kernel exploit and P2JB have been rewritten in C, and P2JB 2.0 now runs under 1 hour, so the same improvement, cutting it down from 2 hours to below 1 hour, around 50 minutes. So that's been added there too. We also have the Autoloader, some improvements to the Autoloader. So I've done a full video on this already for the YouTube jailbreak, where you can use an Autoloader to autoload your payloads. Well, we have an update since then. We have tweaks for improved stability with this version. So it adds a 1 second delay before killing the YouTube application. So it says be sure that you add more than a second delay in the autoload.txt file, suggesting to add a 5-second delay at the beginning of the autoload.txt. So with the previous version in my tutorial, I just left the autoloader with the default 1 second. But if you're switching over to this one, in your autoload.txt file, you're going to probably want to change that initial delay from 1 second to 5 seconds, so exclamation point 5000 for 5 seconds, in order to get better stability when loading your payloads with the autoloader. Now also at the top here, you can see we have this release. This is actually an older release at the top here, but this one just autoloads the Blu-ray unpatching payload for those who just want to unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak, whereas this one here actually allows you to autoload any payloads that you want to load after running the jailbreak. So that is the one I would set up there. So we also have this DLC emulator project called DLC_EMU from Drakmore, which allows you to unlock DLC for your PlayStation 5 game backups. So for instance, we have a couple of PRX and SPRX files, modified ones, that you need to swap out, presumably using something like the backport payload to swap those out. And then you create a DLC_EMU.ini file in the root of your game dump directory, and then all of the necessary information for the DLCs that you want to unlock. Different package type DLC requires different information. So down here you can see we have a bunch of different types here, like game data, you've got additional content, add-on licenses, virtual currency. So depending on what type of DLC you have, you'll need to identify what the correct package type is, and then enter the correct information in the config file so that when you run the game, it will identify it correctly and unlock that DLC. Thanks to something like this, we might start to see more PlayStation 5 game backups with working DLC content. We also have PS5 Debug returning with support up to the latest firmwares. PS5 Debug is used by mod tools, trainers, and remote debugging software, and can do things like read-write memory, remotely call functions, and add breakpoints and more. Plus, you can also use it to make your own cheats for your games. So it's nice to see that returning. You can see a lot of things have been fixed on previous firmwares, along with support up to the latest firmwares now as well. And finally, for some Elf Arsenal updates, this project continues to get so many updates. So first of all, if we go into the settings page, there is quite a few new options. If we go to system, there's a firmware version spoofer, so you can spoof your firmware version. You also have the option for a plugins loader, so you can upload any payloads into the Elf Arsenal folder in the data folder, and then they will appear in here and you can manage those, I guess, have them launch automatically when Elf Arsenal loads. So you have that option. You also have an XML game patches included, which means that you can now do things like apply the 60 FPS patches for games from Illusion. Those patches can now be loaded from within Elf Arsenal. Beyond that, we also have this package guard option in games and storage, which says it protects the PS4 fake package game folders from Sony's database rebuild wipes, which can commonly happen on PS4 and PS5 where a database rebuild occurs, and it does not re-index any fake packages into the database, so it looks like you've just lost all of those installed games. When they're still installed, they're just not added to the database. So this can kind of lock the games so that they cannot be removed from the database when a database rebuild occurs to prevent that issue from happening, which is quite handy. So we also have a task manager, so you can view all of the processes running on your console and kill certain ones. And we also have an expanded sensor panel added here too, plus many other useful features. So the pace of development here with this project is just absolutely incredible. So many new features added every day to this project, it seems. So anyway, that's going to basically do it here for these updates. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I will hopefully